to chat or raise your hand, unmute yourself. We'll get to that at the end. First, a little bit about Intellias. We're headquartered in Dallas. Recently opened another office in Chicago for our technology group. We've been around working with the Infor product in the Lawson space since 1999 and recently became an Infor Alliance partner. With that partnership, we support a full range of services alongside the traditional software offerings that Intellias has had for years. It's including, but not limited to, technical services, installations, customizations, development work, doing actual product upgrades and migrations to the cloud, and a full service of application consulting on all different suites. So what's exactly changing? What's the requirement out here, and why does it matter? Effective in March of this year, Infor dropped support for LS's STS in Lawson 10, effectively making Microsoft ADFS, or Active Directory Federation Services, the recommended or really only supported SSO solution for authentication with Lawson. So if you're still running LS's STS in your current state, which I would say close to 99% of the on-premise customer base had been using LS's STS for authentication, but could have been potentially using ADFS or Kerberos for authentication. In the future state, or today, ADFS is really your only option. And so what that means is this mandate went into effect for LSF 1009. Any patches released on or after March 1st of this year have the potential to break the LS's STS. So what Infor means by dropping support is they're really not, it still works, but if you find an issue with it, or if you take a patch released after March, you're kind of out of luck. It may break, it may not work. They're not responsible for supporting it. LSF 10010 and higher, the latest cyclical would be 10011, actually do require ADFS. It's a specific requirement for moving to those versions. How to know what you're using today. LS's STS, I like to use these pictures to kind of just show rather than look at technical configuration files. You'll know if you're using LS's STS today if when you pull up Lawson, you see the screen like the left picture here with the little Infor red square, potentially your company logo, username and password. The ADFS login screen looks like the one on the right, where it's a Microsoft ADFS login page. And the difference here is that with ADFS, the authentication is being handled by the ADFS server. So that responsibility is delegated to another server, whereas in LS's STS, Lawson is actually handling the authentication, or LSF specifically. So the credentials are entered into LSF, LSF validates them, and LSF grants a token for access. With ADFS, all of that is handled by the ADFS server. It authenticates the user and grants a token, which LSF accepts for authentication and allows the user to continue using it. So what does this mean? I'm kind of going to go out of order here, but the question I get a lot is, well, we already have an LDAP bind in place. Our users already use AD credentials to log into Lawson. So the answer to that is you still need to move to ADFS. Even though conceptually it's very similar. With an LDAP bind, you're using AD credentials. With ADFS, you're using AD credentials. The difference is with the LDAP bind is that Lawson is still doing the authentication. With ADFS, that's delegated or handled off by an ADFS server. So what that means is it does require that all users have a corporate AD account. If you are not bound to AD today, or potentially you have a large employee population without AD account access, they will need one. ADFS can only authenticate against Microsoft Active Directory. So all users will need to have a corporate AD account. And really the only thing that's going to change is how the user logs in. So it's going to be potentially the same username and password if you have an LDAP bind in place, but the layout, the design of the login screen, that whole experience will be different. Otherwise, the applications remain unaffected. So ADFS is a Microsoft technology. What it does enable, and again, these are kind of some benefits, some wins, I guess, for you as a customer for moving to ADFS, aside from doing it only because Infor is making you. So I think these are some benefits, some wins that customers are really enjoying out of ADFS for the customers who successfully migrated already. So it does allow for single sign-on with other web-based applications within the organization. So today, you really can't have single sign-on with potentially an application like ServiceNow or another ERP you may have in the organization because LS's STS doesn't really support integration with other products. It's a homegrown authentication solution for Lawson. When you're using ADFS with Lawson, you can have single sign-on with any other application that's set up on that ADFS server and which supports ADFS. So within your employee self-service menu or your corporate internet site, we can have a single sign-on experience between not just the Lawson apps, but other enterprise apps that you may be running. It also allows for silent logon using a domain credential. So what this would mean would be we can enable the integrated Windows authentication mechanism with ADFS. So if your users are logged on to a domain join machine with domain credentials, and we configure ADFS in a certain way, which requires very minimal effort. It's just really a few settings that are enabled. We can make it so that the browser automatically passes the PC credentials to the application, effectively making it so that the user is never actually prompted for a login screen when they go to Lawson. The credentials are passed behind the scenes and silently, and they're not going to be prompted again to log into an application once they've already authenticated with the PC. We also have support for multi-factor authentication natively right out of the box. It does require a third-party subscription to something like Duo or any other MFA you may have within the organization, but it's very easy to configure this, which can be a huge benefit for any external-facing, potentially self-service applications you may have to further harden and lock down access, prevent unauthorized logins to the application. And just one misconception I want to clear up that I hear a lot is that this just has nothing to do with LSF and Landmark Federation. So if you're running LSF and Landmark today, they're supposed to be federated as a process to connect the two security repositories and install the Infor Security Services tool for user management. That has nothing to do with ADFS other than it's a coincidence they happen to have the same word federation in their names. So that federation of LSF and Landmark stays in place, and it's completely unaffected by the implementation of Microsoft ADFS. A little bit about Mingle. Mingle does change or is impacted by the implementation of ADFS, and it introduces a new tool in Infor Federation Services. So ADFS is supported on all three, I guess, of the major releases of Mingle today. Mingle Foundation, which is the free version, I guess, that you all probably are running if you're on this call and that you got with your Lawson 10 upgrade. There's an enterprise version of that, or a paid version, and then more recently, Mingle 12 has come out, which is the latest version that's bundled with the Infor OS, or what was previously referred to as Infor XI technology stack. All of these support ADFS, so you can run it on your current version, or you may look at upgrading Mingle. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Infor Federation Services is a new tool or application that will be implemented or installed as part of the ADFS configuration. It's required in that it supports the synchronization of data from AD to the Infor applications, providing user authorization to different icons or sites within Mingle, and then in the future state, ultimately will help and assist with automated user provisioning to the various systems of roles, tying in users and groups directly from an AD sync. So with loss and security, a couple things here. You do need to be running loss and security. If you're still on LAUA, that won't be supported. But one of the questions I get a lot is, well, what happens to my loss and security LDAP? What happens to my RM records and security classes and roles and all of that? Really nothing. They're still there, still used in the same manner, and will be unchanged. ADFS is the authentication component. The authorization, or what you can do after you log in, which tables you can access, which forms you can access, is still the same loss and security. So it stays in the same place, we won't change it, and it all still works the same way. The one thing that will be changed is the SSOP service and identities. So SSOP will be reconfigured to use ADFS. The SSOP service and identity are what allow for authentication with the web portal. So that service is going to be reconfigured, and the identities are going to be converted, or have to be converted, to conform with the ADFS naming formats. At the time of creation for this PowerPoint, Infor supported both of these formats, the user principal name or Windows account name, and they've recently updated their document to say that the format must match the UPN, or the user principal name, which is like the email address, so user@company.com. So this will be a change to the security setup, how you're provisioning users, and the existing values in the LDAP, and then it will also change how users log in. So users will need to authenticate with that domain qualification. That's an ADFS requirement. Part of the reason for that is ADFS supports authentication across multiple domains, so they require that qualification. With Mingle, and really with ADFS, there are a number of different versions of ADFS. So which ones are supported and which ones do we recommend? I would recommend going to ADFS 3. That is the highest version that Infor supports. So if you're going to implement ADFS 3 and you're running Mingle 11, there's a couple hardware considerations. So your operating system on the Mingle server needs to be at 2012 R2. SQL database needs to be 2012 or 2014, and you need to be running SharePoint 2013. If you want to upgrade to Mingle 12, which is an option that many customers are going for with ADFS implementation, you can run that on Server 2016. And one of the big wins here is there's no more SharePoint with the latest version of Mingle. That whole tech stack is really changed. No SharePoint dependency, no SharePoint installation. That basically goes away with Mingle 12. So ADFS 3 is the highest version that's supported. We recommend running that, and if you're going to do that, there are some hardware considerations and operating system considerations that you should review. For software and hardware requirements, I'm not going to go through this list, but really just make a call out to the Compatibility Matrix on Infor Xtreme. There are prerequisite version requirements for all the different Infor products you might be running in order to support ADFS. For example, LSF must be on 10.07 or higher. So if you're not yet on 10.07, that means you're going to need to update LSF to the most likely the latest version in order to support ADFS. So go out there and review the compatibility matrix, compare it to your current product stack and versions you have, see where there may be any gaps, identify those and include them in your project, updating them in your project along with the ADFS component. So a couple considerations. Many customers are opting to do an environment technology refresh along with the ADFS implementation. Part of that is because they find that one component does need to be updated. We're already having to change some things at the environment level, and it sometimes makes sense to kind of bundle this all together. It's a logical grouping of project activities. So things we've seen customers do, maybe all three of these or one of them, depending on what you're running. Updating LSF to the latest cyclical, which is actually now 10.0.11. Applying the portal 10.1, which is the HTML5, SOHO 4 user experience that Infor is pushing across all their product suites, and also moving up to Java 8. And then for Landmark, moving up to Java 8 and Landmark 11, which enables a ton of new functionality within IPA. And the configuration console, if you're using that tool, is way improved in Landmark 11 over Landmark 10. And then with Mingle, moving to Infor OS, very quick install. We can get these done in less than a day. It's a huge improvement in technology, where you're dropping this SharePoint component, moving to the latest version of Windows. The user experience is vastly improved. A lot of the things customer complained about in the old version are addressed here. And it's also a much better implementation of ADFS. There are a couple considerations when you implement ADFS. Whether or not you use an existing corporate instance, stand up dedicated servers, which version you're going to go with. You have a lot more options with the newer version of Mingle, whereas the Mingle 11 version, you're much more restricted in kind of what you can do, how it's meant to be configured. And then there's potential rework as well when you move from Mingle 11 to Mingle 12. Some of the ADFS stuff has to be redone. So a lot of customers are taking this opportunity to jump to the new Mingle 12 product. Infor OS Lite is actually technically what customers are going to, which is the free version of the full-blown Infor OS that gives you the user experience in the portal, but very limited use of some of the advanced features. So you get the new tech stack with a license swap with Infor. I would investigate the Infor OS Lite and really encourage any customers using Mingle today to look at upgrading as part of the ADFS implementation. So with that, again, my name is Rob Flannery, and my email contact is on here. If there are any questions that you have that maybe come up later, you want to reach out. But in the meantime, I'd like to open it up to questions on the webinar. You can raise your hand in the chat or send messages in the chat, or also unmute yourself if you want to speak out. I don't know, Chad, if you can see if there's anything coming in the queue on your end.
Yeah, right now. Hopefully you can hear me, Rob.
Yep.
Nothing right now. There was let's see, a couple questions last webinar that we might want to just reiterate on at the 11:30.
I'll just go through a couple quick questions that I get pretty much every time we talk about this. One of which is, well, we have ADFS 4. Can we use that? The answer is, well, really any other identity provider. Okta, Ping Federate, ADFS 4, Azure, number of other identity providers or solutions that customers are implementing. The short answer to that is no. Right now, ADFS, direct integration with ADFS 3 is really the only supported solution for Infor. So you're going to need to set up that type of configuration. One other question we get a lot is, well, we already have ADFS within the enterprise. Can we use that server, or do we need additional servers for Infor ADFS? The answer to that one is a little bit more complicated. We'd be happy to follow up, to set up a call and hear more about your specific configuration. But ultimately, the answer is it depends. Infor does recommend you have a dedicated ADFS. There's a number of reasons for that. Specifically, version compatibility. So if your corporate ADFS is not 3, it may not work with Infor. And then there's also some global settings related to timeouts that may conflict between what Infor has, what your corporate ADFS has, and the different requirements for your business users. So it may not be completely compatible in terms of SSO expiration windows, authentication procedures, and things like that. So it is possible to use a corporate ADFS if you're on Mingle 12. but not always recommended, and it kind of depends on your particular scenario. So we'd be happy to follow up if anyone was more curious about that.
Awesome. All right. So, Rob, nothing else has come in the queue. So it sounds like you answered most of or clarified a lot of the information for ADFS. If any of you need more details, you can email Rob directly, and he'll get you that information. We also have helped over 50-plus clients during this season of converting our clients from LTS to the ADFS. So we can absolutely help any of you if you're interested as well. So with that, we will all get back to our regular jobs, and appreciate you showing up today. Thanks, Rob, for presenting, and hopefully you guys all have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.